Hey, it's Kyle Wenrick, and this is video reflection number one. And I'd like to talk a little bit about my placement and the setting and my responsibilities for student teaching in my fall one rotation. Also, wanted to talk a little bit about the kids that I'm working with, as well as other professionals in the school, and what my schedule is like, and day to day responsibilities, and other interesting information, challenges, situations, and other successful situations in the classroom so far in my student teaching experience. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is my placement. My first placement is at the Moog Center for Deaf Education. It is a private school, and all of the students that go to the Moog Center for Deaf Education have a hearing loss to some degree, and they are there because their parents have chosen for their child to learn listening and spoken language. So, being at the Moog Center, it's a very different experience, I would say, than most other settings because it is a private setting, and the instruction is very intense. There are breaks in between, but for the most part, the lessons and the activities are intense because the children that are going to that school, they need a lot more support and development of their skills because of their language delays and other delays that cause them to need more attention and more work in the classroom. So, first, I wanted to talk about the setting. I am currently placed with Ellen Shudo, who is in the preschool department. So, I'm teaching with children that are age ranges 3 to 5 years old. And the day starts off in the homeroom. The kids come in with their parents, the parents drop them off, and we have from about 8:20 to 8:30 is the device checks, and we do the device checks, the listening checks, and then we send the kids to um, a room that has a larger group of students for about 10 minutes, and then they come back to us and we actually do the listening check. So in that time where they go to another classroom, they are working on some type of activity that has something to do with the theme that is being taught for the week. And the theme changes with teachers throughout the department. They can choose their own themes. It doesn't have to be everyone is working on the same theme, so the teacher can choose that, which I think is great because the teacher can focus on interests of the students, which is very important, especially in a school for the deaf. I think that taking children's interests into consideration is very important because it helps engage them in the learning process and they get to learn a lot more and have fun at the same time. So in our homeroom, we have 4 kids to start. So the kids come in, they drop off their book bags, and they immediately go to one of the group settings. A teacher's room that is a larger group setting where the teacher works on them with an activity until everyone gets settled in, and then the kids come back to the homeroom for their listening checks. Let me talk a little bit about the children that I see in the school. So, of the 4 kids in the homeroom class with myself and Ellen, 3 of them I work with. One of them I do not see at all the whole day. He goes to different teachers for different things like speech and syntax and language experience, etc. So he's working with other teachers. In my classroom, and I'm just going to use initials for the children. So the first child is RB. She is 4 years, 8 months old. She has a bilateral profound loss, and her devices are bilateral cochlear corporation nucleus 6 cochlear implants, and she wears those on both sides. RB is only seen for speech, so I have a chance to work with her for speech and speech lessons, developing her speech skills as well. The second student is CM, and CM is 5 years, 1 month old. He's older than the rest of the kids that I work with. He works with RB in the group together. They are in the speech group together. And CM has a bilateral mild to moderate sensorineural hearing loss. His devices are bilateral Phonak Sky V90P hearing aids, and he is only seen for speech as well. So CM and RB are in the same speech group, and we see them for our first group in the morning for 30 minutes. The third child is LD. LD is in our homeroom. He is 3 years, 4 months old. He has a bilateral mild to moderate loss. And for his devices, he wears bilateral Phonak Sky Q70 hearing aids. He is seen for speech, syntax, and language experience. So he's one of the students that is with us for pretty much the entire morning while I'm there until noon. The next student is EM, and she is 3 years, 4 months old as well. She has a bilateral profound loss at both sides, obviously. And her devices are bilateral cochlear incorporation, Nucleus 6 cochlear implants as well. And she is seen for speech, syntax, and language experience. So EM and LD are together in the same group. They're just about the same age. I think they're only separated by a week for a birthday. And their ability levels are very close as well. So those two students we see for most of the day. And the fifth student that I see is AK. And this is basically the student that I've been responsible for since I walked in the door to begin student teaching. Ellen had agreed that it would be a good idea, and Judy, to assign me a student that I would do everything with from the beginning, and is start off with small activities and stepping in, and then gradually, by the end of the first week, I was stepping in and teaching lessons for this child, and then gradually moving up to more children of the 5 and teaching more lessons for speech, syntax, and also language experience. So the experience has been wonderful so far. I love every minute of it. This age group is by far my favorite. I love working with the younger kids. So after telling you a little bit about the kids, I just want to talk a little bit about the other professionals. So the great thing about being in a private school such as Moog is audiology is in-house, so there are audiologists in the school, and if devices need to be serviced or anything like that, or the audiologists need to check some mapping for the implants or inspect the hearing aids or anything like that, it's easy to get to. The students can or the audiologist can come down and get the student and take them right down to the audiology wing and do the test that they need to do, and the kids will be back right away. And that's so great. You don't get that in a public school setting because most of that has to be outsourced, and an appointment has to be made, and it takes a lot more time, and students just don't have the efficiency with being able to go and see like the audiologist or anything like that, which makes it a little bit tougher because you lose some time on that. But with the audiologists and the speech language pathologists and other paraprofessionals inside the school setting at Moog, it makes it so much easier to get places that you need to get to and get the services that you need to quicker, so you don't lose time during the school day, because the instruction time is extremely important. Every minute counts, especially in a deaf education setting. So for the other professionals in our room, Ellen is the regular teacher, obviously, and I'm the student teacher, so the both of us are in there and we're working together. We do not have any teacher's aides in our room because they are spending most of their time in the bigger group settings in the classrooms where the teacher down the hall works with probably like 6 to 8 students, where they do group activities and work together. And most of these kids are new, just transitioning out of the toddler program, so this is their first time in a preschool setting, so they're getting used to routines, sitting in chairs, standing in a line, walking down the hallway, being able to sit in a chair. At preschool age 3 years old, it's very tough, and these kids have to learn how to do that and be responsible for themselves and advocate for themselves for certain things, such as if their hearing aid battery has died, being able to report that to the teacher or any other adult in the school. Even listening for things such as, when I connect a student, if I'm teaching a lesson, before I teach it, I connect the student to the FM system, make sure their device is in, if it's hearing aid, in DM mode, and then make sure I'm connecting with the FM, connecting their devices, and they should be able to report to me, tell me when you heard the beep. And they'll say, I heard the beep, just to make sure that they're connected, and they should know that that's kind of like the beginning of them advocating for themselves and making sure they're taking responsibility for things that are important, such as making sure their devices are working optimally and knowing that they're connected so that they get the best input possible. I'm going to go into my schedule next. So what's great about the Moog Center is the instruction is very intense, but I love the way that the schedule is developed. So the schedule starts off with homeroom and device checks from 8:20 to 8:30. I arrive at the school anywhere between 8 and 8:15, maybe a little earlier some days if we have to meet and talk about things with the supervisor, Judy, and also my cooperating teacher, Ellen. Excuse me. So the first group after the device checks is a speech group, and that is RB and CM, the 4 and 5-year-old students that I see. And that speech lesson goes from 8:30 to 9, and this is basically just a speech lesson where we're working on speech and other skills that need to be acquired or emerging or things just to develop for this group. My second group is speech as well, and this is a new group of students, so LD and EM come in together. They're the 3-year-olds, 3 years, 4 months old, both of them, and they come in for speech lesson from 9 to 9:30. And obviously their skills and goals that we're targeting are very different due to their age group and abilities. So there are certain things that these students are working on that are very different from what the 4 and 5-year-olds are working on that I see. The next group after that, LD and EM stay with us after their speech lesson. We go out and get a drink, take a little break, maybe like a jump break or something fun just to keep them engaged. And they switch to syntax. So we'll work on vocabulary and syntax, just sentence structures, and that we have discussed beforehand and planned for, just different sentence structures and syntactic elements that the students need to work on and are getting better at using in conversation and other sentences. Sorry, excuse me. After this syntax lesson, and that's from 9:30 to 10, then we have another syntax lesson, and another student comes in, but he is by himself. So this is AK, and this is the student that I've been responsible for since my first day of walking into student teaching. And AK is a very interesting story. It was very rough for him when he was first born, child who was very sick and just made like miraculous progress, which is such a wonderful story because we had parent support as well, and I had the pleasure of being able to sit in the parent support groups and talk with the parents about their story and how it was when they found out about their child's hearing loss, and it just gives you a whole new perspective on what types of things. It kind of puts into perspective like what really is important and why this job is so important and why you would love doing it so much, and I really love what I'm doing. So AK is in there from 10 to 10:30, and this is a syntax lesson as well. Also different objectives because he's on a little bit different level, even though he's around the same age. He's a little bit older, probably about 4 or 5 months older than LD and EM in the group previous to his. But the targets are very different because it depends on their ability levels, and students are grouped by ability level in the Moog Center for Deaf Education. That's another important aspect of being in a private school, and that's a school for the deaf where all the students are deaf or hard of hearing or have some type of hearing loss. That students are grouped by abilities, and the teachers really target these skills and work hard to develop them. Excuse me. After AK syntax lesson from 10 to 10:30, and we have team time from 10:30 to 11, and this team time consists of Ellen and I talking about the lessons that are planned or what needs to be planned for the next week or coming up. We'll take time to go over our notes from the lessons that we took, and we always take notes during the lessons to make sure we have data to talk about what worked and what didn't. We talk about things that we could do differently, things that we could do better. We're always talking about the children and how to improve our skills as teachers to help serve them best and give them the best opportunities possible for learning. And this team time goes from 10:30 to 11. Excuse me. After team time from 10:30 to 11, we have our first language experience lesson, and this is with EM and LD, who were grouped before in speech and syntax, so they're together in all their groups. In language experience, EM and LD work on an activity, like a fun activity that incorporates the theme that we're working on for the week, vocabulary that we worked on related to the theme, the vocabulary that will be useful in the activity that the students will have to use, and also lots of targets and syntactic elements that we have been working on throughout the week that culminates into an activity that the kids can kind of take ownership of because they're working on their skills and they can apply their skills to this activity. And in the end, they walk away with some type of artifact that they've made or something fun that they did that can be hung up in the classroom and showcased to the parents, and also have my days where we send a letter home saying for my day what we made and what we did. And I think that really helps the parents understand why we do what we do in the classroom, and it's just a really good experience. After EM and LD's language experience, which is 11 to 11:30, I have what is my last group for the day, and it's another language experience, and this is just with AK, who is the other 3-year-old. And he is by himself for his syntax lesson, so he's with us by himself for his syntax lesson, and he's also with us by himself for the language experience. I really enjoy working with AK. He's a wonderful kid, such a bright young kid, and he works so hard, and you can see that because he's always excited to work, and I really enjoy working with him. I want to talk a little bit about my responsibilities in the classroom. So what I like about Moog is they don't, for lack of better words, they don't really mess around. They want you to get in and get your feet wet and start helping out right away, which is, I love this. And with previous teaching experience, there's always a little bit of hesitance or nervousness when you're going into it because it's something new that I haven't done before. I haven't taught in a deaf education setting. But they ease you into it a little bit, but then you kind of just take off running. And my cooperating teacher, Ellen, has been so helpful, and so has the student teacher supervisor, Judy, at the Moog Center for Deaf Education. She's been wonderful helping me, giving me great feedback on lessons, and Ellen does a great job of writing notes and giving me feedback as well of strengths and weaknesses and things we need to work on and things that I personally need to work on, which is great. That's what I want. So my responsibilities involve in the morning, I'm responsible for AK, and I do his device check, but I also do some of the other ones too. If I finish his, send him on his way. Then I do other students as well, doing the Ling 6 test and checking to make sure that their devices are working optimally. Otherwise, what's the point of wearing the devices? They have to be working optimally to make sure that they get the best input possible, and so they can hear what they need to hear and be able to complete their work and work on their skills throughout the day. So the first week I kind of observed most of the time, but then I stepped in and did a little step in teaching at the beginning of the first week, and since that it's just been gradually more responsibility. So started with the device checks, and then eventually stepped in for vocabulary activities, and then worked my way up to vocabulary and syntax activities, and these were all from Ellen's plans to begin with, and then language experience from Ellen's plans, and now we're at the point where, just over the midway point through the first placement, and I am writing my own lesson plans for vocabulary, my own lesson plans for syntax activities, my own lesson plans for speech, and my own language experience lesson plans. So I'm basically at the point now where I'm writing lesson plans for everything, and I really appreciate Ellen and Judy trusting me and my abilities to do that. And they're kind of just letting me go, and they're giving me feedback as I go, and from what we've talked about, they think I'm doing a great job, and I feel like I'm doing a really good job. I know I can learn so much more, but the best way for me to improve is to practice, and I love the experiences that I'm getting. So I'm basically writing all the lesson plans on my own with input from Ellen, with targets that we're going to look at, and we're going to progress to the point where I start picking targets myself that I think are good targets for the kids. Excuse me. Sorry. And if I'm picking targets, Ellen will help supervise and, think, and we'll talk about whether it's good targets to focus on and things like that, and she'll give me feedback on those. As for challenging situations, I would say that challenging situations is, I'd say, in the most part, when I'm writing lesson plans, figuring out, because the lesson plans are so detailed in a deaf education setting, that you have to make sure you hit everything that you need to hit, and that when you're focusing on specific targets, that you're meeting those targets and you're eliciting language that hits those targets, because you can't pick targets and then stray from those targets. You can't write a lesson plan that has a child, you're providing a prompt and the child has to respond with the appropriate language target and syntactic elements. You can't stray from that, otherwise they're not hitting the target that they're supposed to hit, and that's a bad habit to have. You have to hit those targets because they're skills that the students need to develop, and there's a reason that those targets are planned for. I'm so sorry. So the challenging situation for me is making sure that I'm very detailed in my lessons and that I'm planning them exactly the way that they need to be planned and written exactly the way they need to be written, so that the child benefits the most from the lesson and hits those targets and can use them at an appropriate level, and making sure that it's not too hard for them but also not too easy, because they do have to be challenged and pushed. They have a lot more progress to make in a shorter amount of time compared to typically hearing students, and it makes it more difficult for me personally. It's a challenging situation, but that is resolved by Ellen and Judy working hard with me and making sure that they go over everything I write with a fine-tooth comb and make sure that they give appropriate feedback, and feedback that, if it's always constructive. There are things that I do need to revise and edit, and I'll turn it back in and they'll look over it and they'll say, it looks great. And a very important thing at Moog is they like to know that a student teacher can take advice from advice and feedback from a teacher and incorporate it into their next activity. And I think I've done a great job with that. And when we've gone over our mid-placement evaluation meeting we had yesterday, and both Ellen and Judy have said that I've done such a great job of incorporating those recommendations and things like that, which, I'm very proud that I can do that. And, I'm very thankful for all the teachers that I have at PAX, and also Ellen and Judy helping me at Moog to do that. They're keeping me focused on the goal, and that's what I need to do, and I'll keep doing it, and I keep getting better every day, and that's what I want to do. A successful situation, I'd say I'd have successful situations every day, planning for targets and then seeing students accomplish those targets and working hard. And an area that's probably not talked about as much is like behavior management, and I think that's so important at this age, because these children have just transitioned from a toddler setting to a preschool setting, so they have a lot more responsibilities for themselves, and they have to work hard to do those things, and they have to constantly be reminded, you have to learn, you're learning how to sit in your seat correctly, you're learning how to pay attention and worry about yourself. Sharing is a big issue, and that's very tough at this age, and teaching the kids that they need to share is important, and they do that. So they're learning every day, and I think that's a successful situation for me. And I love the fact that I can work on my skills while the kids are working on their skills, and they're still learning at the same time, and that's great. I'd say that's about it for me. If I have to think about any other interesting information or pertinent experiences, I think one of my favorite things, because I have a strong interest in early intervention, I kind of look at the parent support times where once a week, the parent will come in for 30 minutes and talk to us about the very first time we meet at the beginning of the school year. They talk about, the backstory of how they learned about their child that has hearing loss and how they dealt with it and what that process was like. And I was very grateful to be able to sit in one of those meetings and the parents share their stories with me. It was great to hear, that they love that their child is learning how to listen and talk and develop their skills at a school that's so dedicated to helping them succeed. And then after that first parent support group meeting, the parents will come in once a week for 30 minutes, and another teacher, like the coordinator Liz, will take our group for that time, and she will work with them while we meet with the parents, and the parents will bring in an activity that they like to do with their child at home, and they will sit and they will show us what they do with that activity with their child. And then Ellen is able to give feedback and coaching to the parent and say, here are some things that you can do to help elicit more language from your child, and here are some of the things that we're working on. Here are some questions that you can ask. Here are some things that you could say to help the child develop those skills more. And I think that's so great. That's a great aspect of early intervention, because I have such a strong interest in early intervention. I really love these parent support groups and the meetings that we have with the parents. I think they're always successful. They're always positive and useful. And I think the parents walk away feeling much more confident that they can help their child at home, just as we do in the classroom. And I think that's everything I got for this first video. I'm sorry that it was so long, but there's a lot to talk about, and I really enjoy talking about it. And I love doing what I do. And I look forward to more positive experiences at Moog. Thanks.